Well, we will get started. Welcome, everyone.
Recording in progress.
In case of an emergency, go out the door, and either way, following the signs. If we can't get out, there is an area of refuge at the top of the steps, right? Any agenda changes?
We have a proposed under other business, little update about a potential minor non-substantive change to the LDRs.
Amongst the ones that we're
Separate from what, yes, amongst those, but yeah.
Do we need to talk about it first?
No, we can put it under other business because it will formally come to you if it happens at your next meeting, but just wanted to have an obvious surprise.
Do we need to vote on that?
No.
Okay, I'll add that to the agenda. Okay, open to the public for items not related to the agenda. If you're joining us online, you can raise your hand. Anyone in the room? Okay, announcements. We had quite a few exciting ones in our memo here, which is very exciting. Anything else anyone wants? Announcements? Megan, is this your first meeting? Sure, if I missed the first one. So welcome to the Planning Commission. We're very excited to have you. So we will do an orientation with me and staff, so I know we're scheduling. Yep. Okay. Well,
Before we get to that, could I ask Megan to go on the spot? Could I put you on the spot for just a second to, I imagine that most of the people here know you, but not everybody. Maybe you could say a few words about yourself and yeah, that would be okay.
My name is Megan Emery, and I am professor at UVM. I teach French literature and culture and film. Focusing on the Second World War, decolonization, and migration literature. It's been a hard week. And I was a longtime city councilor for 14 years. And I came back because this is a wonderful city that really does local planning the way it should be done. I give full credit to the staff, but I also think it is a testament to the level of commitment on the part of our residents and longtime chairs. And I just wanted to say that I'm really, really delighted to be serving in this function. I'm grateful to the city council for appointing me, and I hope to bring forth what I've learned, not only as a counselor, but also as a researcher of eco philosophy and different policies and strategies for transitioning to net zero in France, where I spent 6 months on board. Thank you.
we're happy to have you with all that philosophical
You are, yeah, it's pretty amazing experience that you're bringing to the table up here. Maybe Helen set a precedence that we sometimes might get our most experienced city volunteers to come and join us. And I guess with that, you are a full member, so don't hold back. You're not one to hold back, but I just want to let you know, like, you are, if we're voting on anything, you're in already. So I'm going to wait for and ask any questions that you feel like you have. Usually benefits all of us. Other announcements?
I would just report that the construction in Hubbard of the new bike path is getting really close. The gravel's been leveled out. You can walk on the gravel after hours if you like. It goes right down to South Point. It goes right across the property line and right down to the actual street. And it's looking good. I'll be really happy when they pave it and then landscape it, and it'll then look like a really nice place to bike.
Okay, then I guess we can jump right into item 5, which
Yes,
is,
quick one,
Oh.
just the one thing that's not on your agenda tonight, but we're saving until you had a full body was your reorganizational voting on leadership. So we'll do that either your next meeting or your first meeting in August from the 7th.
sounds great.
You can vote on staff as well, right?
You can make whatever votes you
Staff.
choose to. They would not be binding, but you can.
I'm in a union, so.
I've done that before.
Only on him.
We don't get to vote on the staff. We like the staff.
We do, we do.
Okay, good.
I just like liberty.
Yes, well, some people think it's fun there for so LDR amendments, updates to the planning commission reports. So these were the reports that go to city council and report for the LDR amendments and detailed what was changed in here, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, and the changes in the reports are just reflecting the changes that were already approved in the amendments. They just didn't make it into the reports in time for the last meeting. So it's just removing a couple things that are now inaccurate because of the planning commission's changes to in a few places.
Any discussion?
Sit on it. I'm looking at the motion before I read that.
Oh, would you like to use
Whichever
your
motion
motion?
you'd like.
You can choose.
We're ready. To move.
We can always discuss.
All right, I move to approve the Municipal Planning Commission municipal bylaw reports, LDR 2603, 2606, 2608, as amended, as required by the Vermont Municipal and Regional Planning and Development Act 24 BSA number 444. Thank you.
Nice job, Michael. That's very fancy.
Extras back.
Any discussion on that motion?
I'm new to all this. You reviewed all of this and approved all of it before it was put forward. I just wanted to congratulate you all. I think it's wonderful that we're increasing the number of affordable housing units by 1,000. And that's to be done before 2035, including 750 units affordable to households earning up to 80% of AMI. I think it is wonderful. Goal 5, pursue larger scale redevelopment and infill along transit served corridors and smaller scale strategic reinvestment, thoughtful infill, redevelopment, and adaptive reuse within neighborhoods citywide. And the compact high density greater than 12.5 dwelling units per acre. I want to congratulate you. I think that is wonderful and smart. And I highlighted something else, just the life safety codes the permitting is already in place. So streamlining and making things just easy for the developer to do. It's great. So.
Any additional discussion? Any comment from the public? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous.
Sorry, who seconded it?
It was Dr. Okay, so item number 6 is the long-term care facilities, as well as tweaks to the commercial use scales and mix of housing types. This is really looking at our project charge. In the recent past, we changed our process to make sure that we kind of set this project charge at the beginning of kind of launching into something to just make sure we've kind of talked through like what the goals are and what we're hoping to accomplish and kind of all the things that were laid out in the memo there.
Right, so to be totally clear on the process, this is not about, it's not intended to be a discussion of any of the merits or the substance of the actual proposals, but it's just setting sort of the boundaries of the scope, like what's being discussed, what are the reasons it's being discussed, what is the planning commission looking to come out from the discussion at the end. So it's not your first discussion of the topic, but it is the first discussion of the scope of the topic.
Okay, with that said, any kind of thoughts on things that are in there?
Yeah. when it came to the question about in or out of the transport overlay district, my first response was to say that they should be allowed only within the transit overlay district, as most, if not all, long-term care facilities have their own transportation. But what about the people who are going in the other direction? You know, families, friends who visit, that may be a problem for them. So I think it's something that we need to think about.
How would it be a problem for families and relatives?
Who don't have their own transportation. If it's going to be only inside the transport overlay district, then people who live outside will have to find their own way without public transit.
Do you think it's appropriate to leave that in there to just make sure we have the discussion? Because I think for now, it's just making sure that we're like stating that we want to make sure we're really clear and about where they are and if that happens.
And the other one, thought I had was about
Can we pause for just a
Exactly
second?
the same.
getting recorded.
Wow. It's getting recorded, but we got at least one comment that it was really quiet. Would you mind switching to the other one and just see better? Ryan, you had the comment that it was hard to hear. Is this any better than it was 10 seconds ago? And we've just opened up. You can speak if you want.
Right now, Paul, I can hear you better than I could hear you before. It's even been hard to hear Michael while he's been talking for the past few minutes.
Okay, Michael, do you want to speak for just a minute?
You want to repeat what I said?
You can say a poem if you want.
Just a level check.
Just say anything.
It's just a sound check.
Can you hear me now?
Besides that last projection, Michael doesn't sound any louder than before.
Speak a little more, Michael.
Michael's usually quite loud. I'm usually the one you can't hear.
Hi, Sue, you raised your hand.
Sue.
Sue, you can speak if you unmute.
It's not so much a question of volume, it's a question of a muffled effect.
Oh,
And that was true at your last meeting, which is why I've been having such a difficult time transcribing it. It's like there's some kind of, not quite feedback, but almost a muffling of voices.
And the last meeting, we were downstairs, right?
We were downstairs last meeting in the auditorium.
Yeah, it may have been the meeting before. It's the last meeting that you had here was where it was kind of like a muffling effect. It happened at a city council meeting that was held there as well.
Okay. Is this better than it was at the start of the meeting? We switched the setting. Is this?
Yeah, I can hear you relatively clearly. The people back further, I cannot.
Microphone is in the sound bar, as far as I'm aware.
Because we had a pickup.
Yeah, the system's been changed sometime.
so it's that thing over there?
Yeah.
The box.
So we need to project toward the box.
Oh, no, it's the sound bar.
Slow,
That's the
right?
bar. And that's the only option we have in the settings is the soundbar mic.
Okay, well,
We'll do this.
Yes.
They just have to shout.
No, I'm gonna speak normally like I would in the meeting. And Sue, is that any better? I just unclicked a different setting.
Not completely, no. And you and Paul are much easier to hear than the rest of the people.
We're just a little closer, I think. Donna, could you say something? Just as a test.
Yes, I can say something as a test.
Yeah, that's better. But if you turn,
You just have to project your voice a little
maybe
bit.
you improve settings and just try to remember to project.
Yep.
yeah, and Kelsey, if you turn your head to look at them, I cannot understand a word you're saying.
Okay. Thank you, Sue.
Yep.
not very natural to like want to talk to Michael. Okay, over there.
We'll keep working on it.
Okay, we'll keep working on it. So I think the first comment about being sure to just look at what's in and versus out of the transit district is part of the listed scope, so that's a no change. And then Michael, what was your second comment?
The other thing I thought we should think about was whether we should have a variety of different buildings. And, you know, if it's a new development or a redevelopment with multiple units, we should think of requiring a variety of housing types as written in the TND. For infill development, that may not be possible, but I think we should think about it for other types of development.
So in the project description, it includes consider 3 related topics, 1, 2, and then 3 says, if regulations requiring variety in building types or scales should be clarified or improved upon. Does that satisfy what you were hoping to find in there?
Yes, I think all 3 points and the project description seem like questions that I'd like to learn more about, and I think this is a good project charge as drafted.
Any other suggestions from Donna?
I don't see anything specifically here related to, I guess it is related to the transit district. But ensuring that if you're not in the transit district, what alternatives need to be emphasized. Particularly because you're not far from a transit route. If that's, the site that we've been talking about, but any particular site, if you're within a mile or so of a transit site, there are options to walk, or, people use all kinds of vehicles to get around on sidewalks these days, so.
Donna, does the language, related topics, if and under what circumstances the use long-term care facility should be allowed? Does that cover that? The under what circumstances?
I think it does.
I'm trying to write it
It's-
broadly.
Yeah,
but
it's
we don't know
one
the
of,
answers yet.
one of the circumstance, yes.
Yeah, I would suggest car share. I know that in Montpelier, there are dense housing units with car share where residents can simply sign up. And that can be something that the building association handles. It can also be something that residents do on their own. And then have a certain set of spaces for visitors. I think that's something that I can't imagine that every unit would have a visitor unless it's perhaps a holiday. I don't know, but even our holidays aren't the same for all of us, right? So I think there are ways.
Okay, any other discussion from the audience? Comments on this?
Yeah.
So far, I'm not hearing any changes to the charge, but.
I'm Tim Burke. I work for White and Burke Real Estate Advisors, and Wake Robin hired our company to go out and find a second campus. They have a campus in Shelburne. It's down off of Bostwick Road, about a mile and a half from Route 7. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's got some cottages, it's got some apartments at grade. It's got an assisted living facility that's 3 or 4 stories high. It's got an administrative building that's at grade with a wing of memory care. The building designs are all different materials, different looks. It's in a rural environment. My mother-in-law spent some quality time there as she moved from independent living to assisted living to then the end. So I was charged, or our company was charged with going out in Chittenden County, Colchester, Essex, Williston, South Burlington, and we even looked at Shelburne for a second campus. We want to duplicate what's there. It's been very successful. There's a 10 to 15 year waiting list of people that want to get in there. And surprisingly, the waiting list is coming more from the independent cottages and apartments than it is at the memory care. You go there through a progression of life, and Megan can speak a lot more intelligently. So I've actually gone to the respective economic development people in the zoning and planning people in each one of these municipalities and explain what I'm looking for, a large site. We like open space. You know, we don't want a dense urban development. We've had several people in Burlington trying to get us. That's not what we're looking to do. That's not what the residents want to do. You know, they have tennis courts and pickleball, and they actually have a sugaring operation. They have all these great walking paths that are interconnected. They have an arrangement with John Abley, you know, to go on to Beach Cove Farms. So anyhow, I've been around looking at various sites, and one of the sites I came across was the Hill Farm, which I'm very familiar with from the days of looking for sites for the hospital and development at Tilly Drive. I'm very familiar with the Hill Farm and all the history, and so I brought that to Megan and her chair of the board and said, you know, this is a really good site. It checks all the boxes. It's big. We're not surrounded by commercial development. It's got plenty of area for us to create walking paths. It's got plenty of area to build the main building. The admin building is call that the Sun. And then the next planted out is the assisted living, which is close to the Sun. And then the next one out are independent apartments or duplexes. And the next one are cottages further away, because as people age, you might be able to walk a mile when you're 70, but a lot of people can't. And when you age, you cannot walk a mile. So I just thought it was a great site, but I also was really surprised when I went to the zoning table and there it was, a permitted use, but denied because it wasn't in the transit overlay district. And I couldn't find anything else in South Burlington that's a large rural setting. And I talked to Jeff, who I know really well. And so that's why when we heard about this, I had written Marla a letter. And Paul got it because she was away on vacation and just said, you know, Marla, I want to understand why this is, because this is a really good business. This is Shelburne's biggest taxpayer, and it's a well done project. And I would think that most communities would really want this type of thing. And they don't rely on public transit, not for their patients. But Megan can speak to that. I don't have those statistics, but that's how this came to be. So we're still out there. There's other sites, but we really like this one a lot. We don't even have a deal with JL Davis. We may or may not reach a deal. If we can't go there, obviously there might be a deal to be had. So Megan, did you want to just kind of?
And I don't do planning commission work. So when I was seeing the agenda item, I realized that through the conversation that you're talking about the scope versus the discussion, but I just would offer that I can give to Kelsey a letter that I think outlines, sorry for this.
And you can table if you want.
If you could state your name for the record.
Sure, I'm a Megan too, Megan Buckley. I'm the CEO at Wake Robin. And I think what I'd love to point out in the letter is that a long-term care facility, as it's defined in the South Burlington Code, really is an exact style in which Wake Robin, or something like Wake Robin, right? I imagine a future Wake Robin will have changes depending upon lots of factors that who knows what that will be. But it's about creating community, and that's what we're interested in, which I actually think has wonderful alignment with the overall point of the transportation overlay. Community creates innately opportunities to meet one another and have transportation. And it's also long-term care facility within the definition talks about support services, and that is what we do. So I can't imagine having a long-term care facility by definition that's outlined here ever not have transportation. It's an embedded ethos of what a community would need to support a senior older adult. So I think that by perhaps not requiring of the overlay, we'll still meet the objectives, which I actually think are wonderful objectives. And by creating communities where support services are actually there, like lots of my residents don't have to leave for all sorts of medical appointments because we bring those services to the campus, and all sorts of other things. So I just would offer the letter for review for as we think about this discussion in the future, and would love to certainly answer questions when that part of the process is online.
We're happy to accept written public comment, and we'll bring it and put it in the planning commission packet the next time it comes up for the discussion of the substance.
Yeah, and then my other is just question from a format perspective, like what's the rest of the timeline for this? I was looking through the notes in terms of what the next kind of check-ins would be, but just curious from us.
So currently as drafted, and we could make adjustments to this, we're not fast. But the idea would be, as we have it in here, that we'll be looking at this between now and October, probably talk about it at multiple meetings. Typically we have discussions and then there's questions and maybe we get comments. And then the next possibly be included in the next set of amendments. We try to like kind of combine multiple amendments. So it would probably be, I mean, we say after October, so probably late fall, early winter, probably the soonest, I would guess.
Yeah,
Might be going to see.
We had just noted the next set of amendments that occurs after October to put it outside of that timeline of the discussion timeline. There's an outside chance of something happening in the late fall as an amendment, but it's more likely to be in 2027.
I would also just throw out there that the demographic of what long-term care facilities, whether it be Wake Robin or anyone, desperate Vermont needs more housing that supports older adults. So regardless of Wake Robin, I would just throw it out there to be mindful of the timing, because projects like ours require all sorts of additional work. And I know that you all know this, but it also in terms of like licensing and everything else. So the further out we go, also just has larger impacts as we try to support more people. As Tim mentioned, we have wait lists that I've never seen before. And people who are living in your South Burlington communities are on our list as well. And just meeting the needs of that demographic in Vermont is living it. I'm sure you all know that. But as much as we can be mindful of all of that. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So,
You can ask the question.
no, I was going to ask whether the landowner has a view on this, Jeff, whether you're fully supportive of this effort. We hope you are too.
One thing as far as the transportation goes, some of the conversation we've had previously, it's not just residents.
Sure.
It's employees getting to the facility, it's visitors getting to the facility. So that's kind of the reason why the transportation overlay restriction is there now, is to facilitate access to those things and try and not place them in areas where it's inaccessible. So if you have any comments that might address how you handle such things or facilitate such things, that could be helpful.
Yeah, happy. I can certainly work on some more details. I would say that we're Shelburne's largest employer, and in a situation, I would say that has different challenges being in Shelburne versus South Burlington. So transportation is our largest area that we focus on for our staff. And I would say public transportation is, the concept of it is lovely, but the way in which we see people accessing it is so small. So we have ways in which we do that, but we also have other creative ways in which we supported staff to, we have a healthy car fund that supports people to, fill the gap so that they can get anywhere. Because coming to work is one part of transportation, but living in Vermont, if that was the only challenge for transportation of just getting to and from work, but people also need to get groceries and pick up childcare and all those things. So I'm going into too many details.
And I know the commission is all aware of this, but just sort of for the public record, just a reminder that the thing being discussed in this is the use of long-term care, not any individual business. So the commission's responsibility is to think any operator. So any feedback, my perspective, any thoughts that you have Megan, that is rooted in, say, any statutory responsibilities might be helpful in that, to understand if it is not just the model that Wake Robin chooses to do, which is, wonderful and is right, but there may be regulatory requirements, like, hospitals have, a whole bunch of stuff through their certificates of need of providing, access and things like that. So anything in that realm, I imagine would be welcome, and we'll be doing research on that as well.
Well, thank you very much for.
Yeah, this is actually a question for staff. Because I recall not that many years ago, there was a big emergency that Beta couldn't build the parking lots the way they were supposed to. And suddenly it changed. The city was able to adopt something pretty quickly to make that happen. How long did that take? And what was the mechanism that allowed that to happen?
As I recall, so statutorily, a round of amendments can, once you all have concluded, what represents a good proposal,
Including specific language.
right, including specific language,
Completely
can
fine.
happen in about 3 months. The statutes do strongly emphasize doing public outreach in advance of that as well, but it can theoretically happen in about 3 months. My recollection with Beta was that it was about that, and also the timing happened to be when you were wrapping up a round of other amendments, such that the schedule was already laid out. You
Was the
could,
legislature involved as well?
the legislature talked about getting involved, but but it's right, the governor talked about the legislature getting involved. Be clear about the two things. You are welcome to do multiple round events in a year if you so choose. We have employed a strategy over the last few years of trying to be at 1 to 2, because every time there's a change to the regulations, applicants have to understand which set of rules they're under. The Development Review Board has to understand which set of rules they're under. It is complex for folks to understand, especially when they're near each other. But that is absolutely your prerogative to present to council at more than once per year if that's what you choose.
Thank you. Paul, can I make one comment? Sorry. Oh, so can I-
After the person asked.
I'm sorry. Yes. What I think is interesting is that long-term care, right? There's all sorts of ways in which we deliver services for seniors, and there's an interesting piece that is called out differently. So that if Wake Robin wanted to build like a residential care facility, which is similar to assisted living, but it is not the same. It's 2 different licensures, that would be allowable. So I think that part's interesting, that is allowable and can or cannot be part of the transportation overlay. But the long-term care facility, as it's written, says that it needs the transportation overlay. So for me, it's also, I think that those pieces, as regulatory environments have evolved, are important to maybe think about, thinking about it in concert of each other. That independent living residents with community, right? Because long-term care facility is defined in this as having support services, which is different than housing. So I'm just trying to tug at those 2 threads to see if how the definition of long-term care facility is written innately encompasses the transportation goals. So, anyway, thank you.
Any other discussion? So far, I haven't heard anything that would actually change the language as written, but we've gotten some good insight, which is good. Do we have a motion?
Approve the project charge.
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Very good. Okay, we have a very similar next item, item number 7, which is looking at the landscaping related regulations, including landscape budget requirement. There's been lots of comments on this for at least a decade, but we haven't really made any changes. So this has been long.
So as you sort of alluded to, this is something that has been coming. And the landscaping requirements have been in place for a few decades at this point. And as it sort of explains, it has spanned the time between when most development in South Burlington was greenfield, new development in unused or little used sites. And now we're in a position where we are both directing development and having our regulations prefer development in redevelopment and infill situations, and primarily away from our undeveloped sites. The NRP was adopted in that time, like the habitat blocks were adopted in that time. There's been a lot of work on that conservation, environmental protection, open spaces end of things that has directed development to shift to more of a redevelopment and infill landscape. So what our development review team and applicants run into quite a bit is if you requires the same amount percentage of cost wise on a brand new open site as with a redevelopment site, you end up with very different results, and you end up with results sometimes on redevelopment sites where I don't want to say that people are spending money just to meet the number to spend the money, but people will be buying a very expensive bench or something because they need to spend a certain amount of money and they just don't have the square footage, or the tree that was planted 20 years ago at 3 inches is now a 12-inch tree and you can't have the same sort of landscaping added around it anymore. And we're certainly not advocating for, taking out things in order to put in new things to then spend the money. So it's really an all-encompassing look at the landscape regulations, the landscape budget requirements, and how all of that, and the DPW specifications, and how all of that works when our development landscape has shifted from mostly greenfield to preferring and hoping that it is mostly infill and redevelopment. It's also important that even if the cost of a project may not be a brand new building, so you may have a perfectly good building that has been landscaped and the landscaping around it is great, but then the cost of adding a different exterior stairwell or an interior renovation on a big commercial space or something requires more money to be spent on landscaping when the landscaping was already done to a certain level at a previous approval. So it's trying to look at all of those things and making it all make sense in the sort of new system and the new environment that we're in now. So this is the scope of bringing all of those things together. The last piece and what is related to that is also figuring out exactly the mechanics of how to grant some credit or some kind of trade-off or something else in the system for retaining landscaping. So instead of being like, well, I guess I'll just flatten the whole site and then I'll build my thing and then replant some stuff because I need to spend this $100,000 on landscaping anyway, giving some credit against the landscaping budget for retaining the big tree or the existing blackberry patch or whatever it is. There's a lot of different things that could be incorporated into that. So it's both dollars and retention of existing things that are already part of the fabric of the neighborhood. I know I said last thing already, but the last thing is civic spaces and site amenities also have been brought into the LDRs since landscaping was brought into the LDRs as a requirement. So making sure that those two things really work together instead of it being, oh, I've got this landscaping budget and this landscaping thing, and then I have a civic space requirement, really making sure that those things interact. And then so the money is well spent to create really good civic spaces and site amenities instead of just, oh, I'll plant a bunch of arborvitae over here as a screen and then have just an open patio as my civic space, like trying to make those things work well together.
This is a subject, and John could probably speak to this from the experience of the DRB. Of all the things that are round peg square holes, this is probably the thing that comes up most often with the DRB, where the DRB is stuck in some really difficult situations where, a professional arborist is saying, I don't want to plant 8 trees. They're too close together. But unless you can give me this credit that isn't existing in the regulations, I don't have another choice. Nobody likes that.
If you like, there are 3 things that immediately come to mind from previous experience. One, and we talked about it in the DRB quite a bit, and I thought it was going to happen, but I don't believe has. Can we look at the idea of setting up a fund that developers can pay into if they can't use all and this Champlain water came up with the water plan, is there's only so much landscaping they can do on that little spit of Queens Road to spruce the place up a little, because inside the facility, you can't put anything because it's a wastewater plant. So can we go for a fund where if they've really exhausted everything that's reasonable, and the DRB can say, hey, put the excess and the city will use it to plant trees or spruce up the park or do something else that's landscaping related. So I just want to make sure we could at least talk about, that fits in the scope. Another conflict that I've seen come up is existing trees and solar panels. If you require the building orientation to be such, and now we require the solar panels, but they're being blocked by the shade tree. Well, it doesn't make much sense to put the solar panels in if they're going to be completely shaded out during the peak solar time by the tree. So do we have them cut an existing street tree down so they can do solar? Or do we give them the relief from having to put the solar panels up? But it's kind of stupid to have them do both. So that's something I'd like to see fit in here and have us address in some way. And then I guess another thing is if they are trying to save stuff, is just make sure we have pretty strict regulations about how you save things. Because outside the DRB in my previous life, I've seen plenty of developers say, oh yeah, we're going to save that tree, and then just run construction equipment under the tree line and compact the roots, and 2 years later it's dead. And they got some credit for it and they didn't save it. So if we're going to do that, we just really ought to make sure that we get an arborist involved or something to have some really good regulations on what they have to do to get credit for that.
Agreed on all of those things. Connected to those, in city center, in the form-based code, it is formalized that a portion of in the regulations, that a portion of the landscaping budget can be used for hardscapes that make for quality spaces. Outside of city center, that is not codified in the regulations. The Development Review Board has, on an occasional basis, allowed it, because frankly, there were no other reasonable options out there. But giving an actual formal pathway that gives direction and guidance on what to do in those circumstances would be really helpful. And then, I guess similarly to all these things, we've had some circumstances. I don't know if, John, you were on for the landscaping business on Allen Road or next Allen Road. They were building a yard. The site was already fully landscaped. And the parts that weren't landscaped were all trees. The whole project was to, build their yard out bigger, and they were really stuck with, what do we do that makes any sense whatsoever? So all these things are sort of iterations of just an evolving city and how we provide for thoughtful landscaping in a more urbanizing environment where we're trying to prioritize thoughtful infill versus first generation development 40 years ago when this was written.
And I know more than a few times we went with artwork for their landscaping budget. Put in a nice piece of artwork. So
which might be totally appropriate to codify. Yep, but it's hard to, right.
I saw Donna and then Colin, and then Megan. And then,
yeah. I would propose making sure that the charge includes really acknowledging that vegetation landscaping has a climate impact. There's the sidewalk, okay, the panels might be shaded by trees. But also that trees can reduce the temperature of a site considerably. So if you are gonna spend money, you know, like you really have to do so knowledgeably to ensure that you're putting in the right kind of trees, that they're gonna be long lasting, that they're gonna survive high temperatures that are getting higher and higher all the time. And, you know, so shrubbery can be nice looking, but trees can really help make a place more livable.
Big shade trees.
Shade-
Little ornamentals.
Right, shade trees, you know, and things that last a long time. I mean, we love little birch trees because they're cute and they, you know, but they don't last very long, certain ones anyway. Yeah, and then there was something else that was related to that. And I can't remember what it is now. But I'd have to come back.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's a very interesting topic. One other thing I was also wondering about I think it's been a lot, we seem to be discussing a lot about like, oh, maybe like giving people credits or something, or like changing the percentages. I guess I am also curious if there would be an appetite towards moving away from using a percentage of the budget. I'm more going to here are what we require for landscape. Like, for example, we already have requirements for parking lots. Like you need to like put landscaping in the middle and the outside parking lot so it's not to see asphalt. I almost wonder if there could be benefits towards sort of doubling down on that strategy and focusing less on the dollar amount, so you stop getting, you know, expensive benches and more making sure this is a well landscaped area. And I mean, on a related note, I mean, from an like, for example, I like one example of that would be something like, say, incentivizing using more native plantings, like just doing something as simple as, hey, this area of the property, we're just going to commit to putting in a native seed mix and mowing it once a year. That provides great native habitat and pretty palatable areas. It costs next to nothing, which ironically means under a landscape percentage budget, we're disincentivizing people to say having a no-mow zone as part of their landscaping. And I'm not saying we should get rid of all that and say, oh, that's the only thing you need, but I think the best forms of landscaping aren't necessarily the most expensive ones. And I think there could be something worth exploring in trying to think about moving away from numbers based and more as in what kind of landscape do we want in the city and how can we kind of just require you need these things rather than you need to spend dollar amount of money.
So like a performance standard.
Essentially, yes.
Instead of.
Like maybe it's a point system. Like we do that with like transit. Like, I don't know, we have the transit, you know, points for doing certain things for
Transportation demand management.
transit demand management. That's not like, for the most, my understanding is it's not like you have to spend X money. It's like do these things and you get points. It could be like, you know, plant the tree, you get a point. Have a nose mow zone, you get a point. And I think that some kind of system like that might give us very good outcomes and also save developers money on the process. And again, I would give native plantings. Stuff like that can be variable cost, and maybe that gives you bonus points if it's like, oh, you get extra points of visiting planting. Like you do a planting, you get a point, but if it's a native planting, you get a little bonus point on top of that or something. So I could see some potential that could be mutually beneficial both the city and developers' pockets.
Is that, and that's not something that's in this list right now, right? Like the.
I mean, it's currently landscape requirements for certain parking. There's certain landscape requirements, like that was the parking was one that there is currently landscape requirement for parking, but that's specific.
Yeah, and it's not in the charge expressly as like, look at an alternative to the landscaping budget as money, but looking at the landscaping budget and how it works and how it interacts with landscaping requirements, that's all written in here.
Okay, yeah, so I wonder if we need to add like.
You could change
Consideration.
required landscaping budget and amount and components to required landscaping budget structure, amounts and components. Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Just to get this flexible, the goal is to make sure we have nice landscape in the city and yeah, find a way to maybe a percentage isn't the best way of doing that. Maybe it still is, but just our goal is to have nice landscaping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Megan is maybe next.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to highlight one of the other words I saw in the documents we approved earlier, which is nimble. And using envelopes, building envelopes and reusing buildings is much more environmentally friendly than tearing down and rebuilding. And I think that we should be incentivizing that, and we should be keeping in mind where human beings are going to be and where the green should be, because trees are proven to be the most useful, especially outside, the most useful in terms of bringing the temperature down when you have concrete or blacktop or building surfaces. So I would just keep that in mind. When we think about, first, I just looked up because I was in Washington, DC and saw green roofs all over, right by the National Stadium. And they can absolutely be built on existing structures through a process called retrofitting. The limiting factor is usually structural weight capacity. Saturated soil and plant life can add 15 to 30 pounds per square foot for extensive systems and up to 100 pounds for deeper intensive gardens. So that has to do with, of course, carbon sequestration, right? So I just wanted to put that out there as an option. Of course, solar has to be taken into account, but nimble is the idea. With regard to the wastewater treatment plant, could they do something to enhance the biological processes that are happening in, the fermenting of all of our beautiful waste into something that would perhaps be better for the environment, for the farmers, for whoever. And of course, our river and our lake. That's so nimble. And think about what other environmental steps could be taken that could fulfill these, these landscaping requirements, which are there not only for beauty, of course for beauty, but also to bring down the heat, right? Down the temperature.
Yeah, is it my turn?
Yep. Oh, wait, it was Michael.
Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay, that was really kind of continuing Megan's thought, because I don't think that the landscaping portion, I don't know if the intent was dealing with climate issues, but I think we need to make that a major emphasis of it. Because there are so many things that you can do one way and make a space much more tolerable from a heat standpoint, and also cold. The other piece, because I was going to ask about the overlapping parts with the Public Works Department. Because, paving, and certainly in Market Street in this area, there's been a lot of efforts to try to use different kinds of paving to increase to reduce the amount of runoff. And, the last thing that Megan brought up about green roofs is another one of those issues, because green roofs, from a prevention of flooding standpoint, this is the major reason that cities are doing green roofs. It's not just to cool the temperatures, it's because those green roofs, they're like sponges, they absorb a lot of water. So instead of flooding out streets, it stays in the roof and it filters in a lot more slowly. So there's this could get complicated when you start including all of those things, but they do tend to fall under the guise of landscaping.
And I think that is really important. That because these blanket regulations, right, are really hard when it comes down to the individual solutions that really work for people. Yeah. And that's where we have to give like a long list of options and give our staff the power to work with those local developers that are wanting to do something smart and good for our city and for the business that's going to be in, or the housing that's going to be in that building. And so that's where we need to give people that leeway, and also like a drop down list, like which of these solutions best suits, your needs.
And then also the idea about giving some monetary credit, because some of these things, green roofs are not inexpensive.
Yeah.
They're not inexpensive. And so if there's a trade-off there, if you can do less of something else by doing a green roof, that would be beneficial because potentially there's projects that it could really work for. And the buildings here in downtown, they're all flat roof buildings and it's just and they're all residential, so it was just killing me.
Well, keep
If
in
we
mind
don't get
that
any
we
green
do
roofs.
require roofs, so this is sort of to John's point before. We require them not only to be solar ready, but installed solar. So you've got your own competing interests potentially if you elect, so under the state definition of a solar ready roof, if it, I believe, I should double check this, but I believe if it is a green roof, it doesn't have to do with solar. So you're gonna be choosing between different things.
Okay.
I should note, just because we're on a little bit of a conversation about green roofs and stormwater, we already have stormwater standards in our regulations that say that stormwater shall not leave the lot. And the way you developed those ones was you did not tell them how. You told them that this is the base expectation. And Jessica, you can probably speak more thoroughly to that subject, but I recall that the conversation was intentionally to not tell them how to do it, just this is our bottom line expectation. So green roofs is a way that conceivably somebody could help.
Just a clarification is, we do require these stormwater practices. Many of them have plants. Does the cost of the plants in those get to count towards the landscaping requirement? Because that was one of the notes I wrote down, how does it interact with the stormwater?
I believe it does. My recollection is that plants themselves are not usually high dollar items. In the storm,
but the duck goose one over here did have quite a bit of enhanced, that would have been much more expensive than the fancy.
I think that something along those lines can be part of what this helps to clarify on that subject. Our current landscaping standards largely predate any of the things that you're talking about. They were developed 40 years ago to say, hey, when you've got your big parking lot, make sure you put some trees in it, right? That's about as much guidance as is given to the TRB today.
Could we still put green roofs though in the landscaping and then it would just kind of help them satisfy the stormwater requirement?
Well, it sounds like it sounds like a thing that we should maybe put in here, but also note that we have to be clear about how that interacts with the solar roof requirement, because it's maybe people could choose one or the other. I don't know. It's something.
It's definitely putting roofs are very good places for solar. And if you're going to choose between solar on the ground and green on the roof versus green on the ground and solar on the roof, I definitely want to go that way. So I'm not against green roofs per se, but I guess we don't want to make sure we don't want to accidentally disincentivize solar by pushing people to put green roofs because solar is green its own way.
And that's
just
why
in their way.
balconies. Balconies is another place where you can have this kind of planting and it brings that cool air directly into an office space or a residence.
Sure. But yeah, and I guess I was actually going to make the exact point is this, really make sure that I know with the stormwater treatment manual, there are a lot of options you have available. I'll be completely blunt, some of them are kind of just much more artificial and more kind of buy this expensive filter type thing and it will solve your stormwater problem, as well as others are plant a bunch of trees or do a bunch of bio stuff. And any way we could nudge people more towards the latter is, I think, could be beneficial. And essentially, as you were saying, making sure that we can work, but we have the stormwater treatment manual really work to make sure that we're kind of adding on extra layer of incentives to make them really try to work them together. As you said, some places do quite well. I think 510 Shelburne Road as well is another one that they think a pretty good job of using a ton of bio stuff for their stormwater treatment. And I hope it got counted. And I guess I want to make sure we keep doing that. They've got this very kind of cool lands. They're kind of storage ponds area, or just kind of this depression that's got all these really nice plantings in, and it just looks like this weird kind of gully. But then it is also in a flood, it'll fill up and it will satisfy their state requirements. And I want to make sure that we are it looks great too, you know, that's definitely something we should strive to do.
So a question, so are we considering to allow green roofs to be part of a landscaping budget?
That's part of the future.
Just like,
Something we.
I think it just came up.
Can we discuss it with this project charge?
yeah,
Anything we've talked about so far that we can't discuss under this project charge, then we need to modify it. Other than that, we'll have another crack at it.
There are, I mean, I like John's initial comments, because I'd also noted for myself that perhaps the budget that cannot be spent should go to the city's landscaping fund or tree management fund, because it's generally underfunded. So that's one of the, I don't know that we should be too prescriptive, but we might be a lot more prescriptive than we are now. For example, anecdotally, I went downtown last weekend, it was 95 degrees on Swiss Street and 100 degrees downtown. And the reason it's only 95 degrees there only is because of all the green space. There's a golf course, there's Wheeler, there's Veterans Memorial. There's a couple of acres of green space in our development. So, you know, all that green space and all those trees make 5 degrees.
Yeah.
So
Dense traffic overlay area. Those green roofs and balconies.
Yeah.
Make a difference.
So, you know, using the funds for the city to improve its landscaping and tree management and shade. I'd also, something that I noted here that we should consider in the future, considering given that the increasing temperatures in the country that we're experiencing and expected in the future, what about requiring outside parking to be covered and the roofs requiring solar?
So.
very expensive, like extremely expensive is the.
Right, but it can be revenue producing as well if you have EV charging there as well.
Sometimes.
I would say that is a perfectly it's a good topic for the planning commission to discuss. I think it's outside the scope of that. That is parking. That's parking design, not landscaping, I would say.
Well, yeah, well, you could leave the landscape around cars untouched, just asphalt, or you could shade it. But that's another thing. Pervious surfaces for parking, not for roads, but for parking. And I've seen it in Ottawa and other places where the base is the same as if it was asphalt, because you've got a base of gravel and so on that has to absorb water. But the top layer is or some kind of brick with honeycomb, and basically grass grows in there and the water goes through. So it's something to consider for parking place landscaping.
I'm curious, why is it more expensive to put solar on parking as opposed to a building?
Because it's a much, because you already have kind of building there, and you kind of bolt it directly to the building versus how you build these big tall pylons to fit over, have a car fit under it. Like
they're not big, they're like a single flat.
yeah, it's still bigger than bolting the top roof.
The most substantial examples around us are, one is behind the UU Church at the top of Church Street, and one is at Echo. And it's pretty substantial structure for both of those. We're starting to hear a little bit of interest. We've already made some amendments in our regulations that clarify that if you're doing solar, you don't have to put landscaping under your solar parking. Just to be clear on that. And also, if you choose to do solar over parking, that would count as meeting your solar roof example. So if you chose to do a green roof on the roof, you could do your solar over parking. What I have heard, this is a couple of years out of date, so I know the economics of solar stuff is changing dramatically, but at best, it was a break even in Echo. Financially, that it was really a mission-driven effort. So I don't know that we're there yet, that it is pays for itself.
I guess more comments. I am not at all opposed to putting solar on in parking. Like, I think it's a great idea. I just, with all these conversations in the back of my mind, I'm like, one of our missions is keep housing affordable in new developments, and essentially requiring someone to erect, you know, like a $30,000 structure for every parking space or something. It gets, I worry that's just gonna get passed on to the cost of building housing. And I know it's a balancing act with all of this, but I think we just need to be cognizant of what we're requiring to make sure is not a high cost item.
I had in mind more public parking. But that's, which I've seen elsewhere.
Regardless, I think Paul was correct on this, probably is LLS for this particular project. Or Kelsey.
That was my preface, it's for the future.
Yeah, right, it's too. I'll get public comments in a minute. Yes, so it sounds like a lot of good ideas. I also wrote down like how to potentially include like habitat or edible landscaping or restoration type things that might be happening on a project, because those aren't necessarily as expensive. I think it piggybacks on what you were saying, Colin, like some things that we might really want to see might not be a really like high cost item. We wouldn't want to like.
And that's actually sort of buried in here, but that we didn't talk about. Some of the feedback along those lines that our development review team has gotten is all of the cost today is for the installation, not the management and maintenance of it. And so some of the things that are lower cost to make them thriving could be both incentivizing management, but also give the developer a chance to actually have a contract to, you know, for the next 5 years, maintain this so that it is going to succeed and thrive. And while that's not exclusive to edible type things, it is certainly, you know, pruning those correctly in the first few years can really make a big difference. So that is incorporated in that way, but happy to have it more broad as well.
You have the enforcement mechanisms to do something like that?
So there's a couple of things. There's a 3-year landscaping bond, that if something dies in the first 3 years, they have to replace it before their bond is released. Already existing. But we had comments, we've discussed this with our city arborist and our director of public works and a project manager of public works. And there's a desire to see, like, you plant a tree, it survives for 3 years, but it needs to be maintained in a certain way for it to survive 10 or 20 years. And can you reserve some of your fund, if it's still stayed monetary, could you reserve something that then is either given to the city to do the pruning on a street tree or something, or is it a maintenance fund that you can retain and say, like, I'm going to do this kind of maintenance every 3 years until this fund runs out, and it's for the next 15 years. That would require some administration and some structure, but there's sort of the beginning of it with that escrow. So there's, again, this is this conversation about the scope. So, but this is something that is possible, just would require deciding whether it's worth the administration and the ongoing condition on a property to allow someone to say, I'm going to put $10,000 into a maintenance fund.
And I guess part of the reason I said restoration is it actually came up with Chittenden Water District, where they're right on one of our little impaired streams, and they're interested in the name of like doing good water quality work at an organization doing like a floodplain restoration. But like that may or may not be the type of thing that would count, because it would typically be kind of like relatively cheap seed and small little trees that don't, I mean, so I don't know. I guess just thinking about this.
Well, you can certainly add some sort of your landscaping and climate improvement. And it's broaden the scope a little bit, and that would allow things like that to count eventually.
Along those lines, water efficiency in landscaping. In other words, less lawn, more trees and shrubs. No need to install a sprinkler system. You know, so that they use much less water than you would if you've got grass everywhere. And one of the other things about the parking, and I'll leave it at that, was that it would certainly support our climate action effort to have solar on covered parking if we can. I know it's not in here, but full of future.
So we do have some comments in the audience. So we have Brian online. Elsie just enabled you to talk, Brian.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a little hard to follow the meeting still. So I apologize if I'm being redundant. I understand this is a scoping discussion. It is a topic I love a lot. I really like what Colin is saying about discussing moving away from cost percentage and towards standards. And also what I hear Jessica saying is sort of dancing around things that fall under ecological value. You know, we have this discussion about appearance and aesthetics with landscaping that tends to be perhaps the dominant part of that. And then we have these suggestions of looking at climate, but you can do something with landscaping that is good for the climate, is creating shade, is sequestering carbon, but is also very bad for ecology. And I think, you know, if you count all the Norway maples that are performing as street trees right now, that's a great example of great shade, carbon sequestration, and a huge invasive problem we have that is really bad for our local ecology. When I walk around developments that are going in, it's very easy to identify species that are from Asia and Europe predominantly. And for a landscaper, those are popular because less things eat them. And so that plant will for sure be there in 3 years, but it's also likely to spread throughout the area. So I really would like to sort of take some of Jessica's comments and put them under the ecology umbrella, and having you guys in the future discuss some of these performance standards around the ecological function of landscaping, because I think that starts to address more of those things like, you know, restoring the floodplain, or having trees that are native to this area that will support bird habitat, and things like that. The other thing I notice a lot with construction projects is they clear an area and they might replant or revegetate some of the area they clear, but they don't necessarily do all of that with intention. And the result is that a lot of invasive plants can easily take hold after the disturbance, and really take off. And so making sure that they can use whatever existing budget, or even just having the requirement to manage the invasive species that exist on the parcel, both when they're doing the construction and to make sure that they don't take hold after. It's another thing that falls under that ecology umbrella that I would love to see addressed and added to standards.
Great comments, Ryan. Thank you. I think you articulated what I was trying to say really well. Some of those. Go ahead.
Yeah, 3 things. Parking lots, if you plant large canopy type trees around them or on islands in the middle of them, they provide shade for cars, shade for the asphalt, right? They can help cool those environments as well. It's a really easy way to do it without building a structure. And in terms of solar, there is a Vermont company that builds a tracker. It's called SolarFlect. They have one sitting in the middle of a parking lot down in Middlebury right now, at the Granite, it's called the Marble House. And it actually charges up EVs at the same time, but it can also be tied into the grid or into your local system, whatever. And as far as like street trees and aesthetic and canopy, I mean, I moved into cider mill back in 2012. I can't begin to describe to you how big the street trees have become in the last 10 years. They're just enormous, and they just shade the sidewalk, they shade the street. And you say the same thing in Butler Farms, right? Butler Farms, 25 years ago, just had little, very small street trees, right? And it's a forest now among all those streets, and it creates habitat for squirrels and whatnot, and lots of birds. So, thank you.
Talking about, in response to Tim, having, just wildscapes is also landscaping. Now, that can be homeowners associations might not appreciate, at least not all of them, but actually they're better for all of those ecosystems that Tim just noted, including the trees. The trees benefit when they have plants and bushes, whatever, around them. All of that is part of an ecosystem, and insects and all the little critters that live there too. So I just think that. Yeah, and why not incentivize it? Keep the field next to you natural. That will count.
Sorry, I just need
Well, and John made a comment, just kind of, I don't think it got recorded, but it's probably worth throwing it out there, but the idea of at least limiting.
The most non-productive thing.
Limiting the size of, cultivated single monoculture lawn.
Incentivizing something better.
Yeah, it's like, it's okay to mow something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a monoculture lawn.
I think one thing that you have done in recent years that has a likely significant positive effect in that direction is to reduce some of the large setbacks that you had. Because if you require 25 feet on every side of a thing, it's going to be lawn, right? Because it's not usable for something else. So by reducing those in various cases, I think that is an area that you've taken some positive steps, even if that wasn't the stated goal of it. It's really hard to use that space for something other than.
I'm still very curious about addressing those for stuff like the industrial and the commercial districts, those setbacks too, because they also have those huge ones outside of
Really
Kimball.
big, right, there's big setbacks
Yeah.
from some of those districts that they could plant things in there, but they definitely can't bring the building closer, and so they're sort of.
This is gonna be for new construction, but it's just kind of astonishes me how people will buy a house with a beautiful tree in the front yard, and then in the first year they cut it down.
Yeah.
It happened right around the corner for me, and it's like, it was a perfectly good tree. And from a climate standpoint, I planted trees to the northwest. Actually, I put pine trees into the northwest because we get a pretty wicked wind out of the northwest in the wintertime. And I think those trees have saved me so much money on energy. Just because it's like, all that wind, because you notice it when you go to a north-south street. And it's like, it's super cold, because the wind is wicked. So that's another climate related benefit of planting trees in a deliberate way. Now, Victor Olgay, there's a, Design for Climate, that book is what, 60, 70 years old now? But it's all the principles that, a lot of people still don't follow.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple, the principles, you just have to think about how things grow and how that affects the climate.
We knew how to do things 100 years ago. We forgot how to do things after World War II.
Yeah.
Well, the trees where I live are like 40 years old. We have over 20 ash trees, spend $2,000 a year to keep them healthy. And a lot of lindens. And the shade that these trees, 40 trees in our development produce it's fantastic.
I'm getting the feeling we can't vote on this tonight.
On what?
I don't think anything that was discussed is not included in the broadly written scope.
Okay, you're thinking so, because there was.
Yeah, just to me, for example, in the second bullet of the topics to be considered include, so it's not a limitation, first of all, but then the second one about landscaping budget, how much should be required and what is the structure of required funding? I think that gets to some of the questions that we had about the structure of the system. what is allowed to be included. So that includes some of the things like offsite mitigation and retention of existing landscapes, things like that. Specimen trees and landscapes, clarifying credit is in the fourth bullet, clarifying credits towards landscaping budget and requirements for retention of specific trees and or areas of vegetation. So that's pretty broadly written. Jessica, your floodplain thing, I would say it was included in what is allowed to be included in, credit in the landscape budget. Was there anything else specific in here? I think a lot of it's intentionally written fairly broadly to be like, let's look at this whole system and sort of not necessarily build it from the bottom up, but really look at the core of it and see how these things interact and where we can make them clearer and where we can have them interact with the DPW specs for street trees and other things.
One suggestion. So built into the mandate of all things that we work on directly from goal 1 of the city plan is to consider climate change in every policy decision that we make. So you don't have to say it here. However, if you wanted in the project scope and goals, you could add a sentence that specifically, discusses one of the goals is to, look at update landscaping and to explicitly be looking at climate change. You could.
I think we did mention climate change as being one of the benefits of some of the things that we.
Right, so I've heard that in the conversation today. So if you wanted to add that in, you certainly could. You don't have to though, if you don't want to, because as it says, city plan, the overall goal, all things are looked at through this lens. So it is, but if you, for public transparency purposes, want to add that in there, you could add that as sort of an explicit goal that you're looking to update.
Developers who are reading our land development regulations.
Well, that'll be in the regulations themselves, how you do it, but in terms of how you're framing out the work you're gonna do over the coming months. And I think that covers a lot of the things that you talked about in different ways in your conversation today. So you could add a sentence.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I think I would just, especially given that this is an internal project, not consultant project, the people that are doing this research are in the room with us and have heard all our comments. So I'm not too concerned with making tweaks in my new set to the project scope because the people that are researching it have heard all our comments already. And the scope is pretty broad already.
So the two things that I do wonder about, you do specifically call out public works and their specs, but it doesn't refer to the stormwater stuff at all. And that feels like there's, I guess I'm just wondering if we need to put like in stormwater or just.
I had a comment about that because Paul said, people they're left on their own to do whatever they need to comply. But the state has a very comprehensive list of best practices for stormwater systems, stormwater management. I know I sat on a committee that down in not Stone, but next door, Waterbury, which developed the rules for stormwater. It was an A&R committee.
Right, so you do specifically, I was shorthanding my comments. You do specifically reference the Vermont Stormwater Management Manual in our standards.
Yeah.
So Jessica, for stormwater, I'm wondering if under project description, the last part of the sentence where it says the relationship between those regulations and the Department of Work specifications, I could remove the and then add at the end the stormwater ordinance.
And that sounds good. And then the other thing that
Stormwater regulation.
So the other thing that feels like maybe it's different enough from what's in here is like if we might include something that's not landscaping, like art or a fund to pay into, and maybe that falls into like the structure and what counts, but they do feel very different than like trees and shrubs. Like so some of the stuff that
Work is currently allowable.
it is.
Well, as DRB, we couldn't have approved it if it wasn't allowed.
Center, it is explicitly allowable. Elsewhere, the board has interpreted that if it's allowed in the city center, perhaps it could allow it elsewhere. Is the board has 15 years of having applied it, but not a lot structurally in there.
So if I put in landscaping budget, where it says a potential allowance for maintenance funds, if I take the and out, that's before that, and it says all the things, what's allowed to be included, how funds are accounted for, a potential allowance for maintenance funds, a citywide landscaping fund, or similar other uses.
I think that's fine, but then just as long as we acknowledge that we might talk about a different way of using it, like an offsite.
Are we gonna get, on the specimen trees, are we gonna get some recommendation from our arborist? As to,
So our arborist has updated, they've updated our DPW specifications about street trees. So he's written in a whole table of this kind of tree needs this kind of spacing and all of that. So he's done that technical work on the right of way stuff. We could ask him about standards for specimen trees.
benefit from that.
I think it would be more beneficial to have a standard that we give them versus essentially making them need to hire arborists to do all of their landscaping, yeah.
And there's some interface here between the DPW specs and these regulations. Things that are in the existing city right of way are not subject to zoning, generally speaking. But planned new streets are, and there are circumstances because it's specifications, there's an opportunity for us to point to a spec in some cases, including there is a whole, variety of trees and, minimum sizing and that kind of stuff. That's really technical aspects that don't need to be in your zoning, can just be in DPW specs. So
And there's
making sure that we're calling out a spec when it's really a spec and not a policy so much.
Yeah, the development of the two documents over time, the DPW specifications and the land development regulations over the past, 2 decades or whatever it is, have developed near each other, but not always talking to each other.
Specs are only about 3 years.
Right. So, and then they end up where some things are in the LDRs because they're older than the specs that should be technical regulations in the specifications and vice versa. No less vice versa, but still there's room to sort of disentangle what should be in the LDRs versus what should be in the specifications with a reference from the LDRs.
So I guess speaking of that, if we feel like there's interaction that needs to happen with the arborist, is that a thing we would put in here now? Or that's just something you would have?
That's just us using our internal resources, I would say.
So I think we had a few updates that you just went through. Everything else seems like it's covered under one of those bullets. Are we ready to approve?
I move that we approve the work. The charge on landscaping regulations
With the
edits.
with the added additions.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Sorry, who was the second?
Michael? Okay. Any discussion from us or the audience? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, wonderful. This is gonna be a fun one. Then we have item 8, which is our tier 1A update on historic sites.
Yeah, so this is really for your information, there's no action required. It's just keeping you all in the loop about the progress on our end for the tier 1A application. Just as a step back and for Megan's benefit, tier 1A is a new part of Act 250 that allows cities, municipalities broadly to apply for certain areas that have been identified by the Regional Planning Commission and approved by the Land Use Review Board to be exempted from Act 250 review. The municipality needs to prove certain things and that we have the capability to do this. We have the regulations in place that cover certain topics that we demonstrate a compact settlement pattern and connected multimodal transportation networks and the ongoing work towards improving all of those things. So it's something that we've been working on the staff end and have the general thumbs up from the Planning Commission and the city council to be.
It would be more than a general thumbs up. We've been working on it for a year plus with multiple presentations, discussion by the planning commission, presentations to council.
Lots of thumbs
Yes.
up.
I don't want to undersell the work that the commission has done here.
Yeah.
We've had probably 6 meetings where the commission has spent a lot of time working on different aspects.
Yeah.
And we're expecting to bring a request to council at their August 3rd meeting to submit the pre-application.
So what we wanted to bring in today is just what we've been doing on the side, on the historic resources side. We are not required to have a historic preservation regulation or ordinance. It is just demonstrating that our tier 1A area and the regulations that allow development in our tier 1A area is, now I'm going to blank on the word, is it compatible or is it doesn't necessarily interfere with or something. It's less than a full like preservation ordinance, any historic resources in the area. This has been, I'd say, a little trickier than we anticipated. The State Office of Historic Preservation, I at least wrongfully assumed that the State Register of Historic Places was a list of historic places that are registered. It is not. It is a lot of files for individual properties that have different notations for whether something is surveyed or listed or eligible to be listed. There's a lot of complexity that I was not aware of and is in a database of scanned, forms from 1979.
Backing up a hair.
Okay.
It is a requirement that we include a map of the resources.
Yes.
Our requirements are not to have regulations that necessarily preserve them. We have to show that we have regulations that are thoughtful towards them. So it's really about the adjacencies to them.
Yep.
And then the thing we have to do, in addition to showing that we have regulations that are thoughtful about historic resources that are around them, is to map them.
Yes.
So that's the tricky part that we've had, it's the mapping.
Yes, and I guess my mistake at the beginning was I assumed that there was such a map, and there isn't. So we made one. With our fantastic GIS analyst, Ariel, we've been working on, and we're still working a bit on this. So this is a rough draft, and I have it on a piece of paper. If it's hard to see up there for anybody, if you'd like me to pass it around, I can.
Is that every structure?
These are the structures that are in the historic, in the database. The airport is one of the hangars on the National Guard side.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
That is a national.
World War II.
Yeah.
Wild.
So as you can, so first of all, as an orientation to this map, because I've been staring at them for weeks, but you haven't seen them at all. The whited out areas are the areas outside of tier 1A. Anything that you see that has a base map, so streets and trees and other stuff that you can see as if it's a satellite, that is the tier 1A area. This is all.
Keep going.
Okay.
Just making the map bigger.
Okay. This is all based on the regional mapping of their future land use categories. So this was done at a regional level. And certain categories are then eligible to be tier 1A, and South Burlington is elected to make all areas, to apply for all areas that are eligible to be included in the tier 1A area. So if you see any of the markers, what?
Keep going.
Okay, any of the markers that are a color but are a little bit more transparent, kind of ghosty looking, they are technically outside of the tier 1A area, but we included the ones that were adjacent to. So there's a building on the Miller Farm that is technically not included in tier 1A because it's institutional agricultural, but it's right on Spear Street. So it's adjacent to the other thing. So you can see that right there. Survey, the light blue sort of aqua color is surveyed but unevaluated. So there's a form that says we know that it's here, or the State Historic Preservation employee that we've been talking to has said there's been a documentation of this, but no determination has been actually made. There's been no application for an actual determination. It's just a survey. Orange is listed on the state register. Teal, there's a couple that are teal that there's documentation for, but are not listed. The one with the big X, this is my working thing, so you can see some of my annotations. There's one that's been demolished that has a big X on it. Anything that you see that has a color and marker and then an X on the marker is gone. We have a document for it. We have documentation for it, but it has been demolished. At some point in the last 40, 50 years. What else? Eligible, green ones are eligible. They've been determined to meet the eligibility requirements at the state level, but the property owners have not applied to be listed. It's an affirmative decision of a property owner to decide to apply to be listed after they're determined to be eligible. So there's a couple like that, like I think it's Rice High School is like that. There's one on the Old Farm Road.
I think it's the barn on Old Farm Road.
The barn on Old Farm Road, I think you're right. And then one other thing is there's the State Register of Historic Districts. We have 2 in the city. One is.
Actually, I want to guess.
Oh yeah, do you want to guess what our historic
There are 2 historic
districts?
districts in South Burlington.
Park, Community City.
No.
A district, it's a little tricky. It is more than one building on a property. There's
Is that
not.
little Swiss hotel thing?
Swiss hotel is one of
Little
those.
hotel.
Yeah.
Allenwood that you can see in big orange.
Yeah.
What's
Good
the
job,
one,
Donna.
Yeah.
Which one are you looking at, Michael?
the one that's behind Dorset, the village of Dorset Park? It's in Ghost next to an X. Go to
The
your
Village of Dorset Park.
That's a,
it's at the west end of the hill property.
I don't see anything.
Here.
to the west.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, it's
okay.
like those.
Oh, there are 2 properties there that were demolished in relation to the Meadowland Business Park development and across the street. So one's on the Heinsberg Road side and one's on the east side and one was on the west side of Heinsberg Road in that area.
Yeah. I mean, all the farm buildings on the property on down too, and recently too.
Well, but they were on the west side.
Yeah, there's some other, yeah. What we wanted to note is that this is a mapping exercise of what's already been submitted to the database, or they already have. We also have a few additional additions. Are they in here? Those the White Street ones that you got from Elizabeth?
there are a couple that have been added. So most of this, the compilation of this is not it's sort of by volunteer action over decades. So
Yeah.
there are sometimes a person submitted their home.
Yeah.
And that might be why it is submitted but not evaluated. There are other times like this green one up here came about as part of the FAA noise mitigation effort. All the properties that were potentially eligible for that were evaluated because it involved federal funds. One home, this one up here, was determined to be in fact eligible independently. Not necessarily as a district, it's a whole other conversation. But it is not necessarily a compilation of everything that is or could be historic in our city. This is a sort of mostly volunteer, but sometimes by something like use of federal funds.
Or through Act 250.
Or through Act 250,
A
sometimes.
few
yeah.
things, especially the ones that were approved to be demolished in Act 250.
Right, but this is not an attempt to be a evaluation of everything historic, especially.
Yeah.
I'd say that this is a reasonably good. I think our review of this is a reasonably good compilation of things that are historic pre-1940.
Yes.
The things that
Yeah,
are after
there's-
1940 that might be also historic, like I think Megan, you mentioned Mayfair Park neighborhood. There hasn't been a statewide exercise to consider
Yeah.
post-World War II neighborhoods. That is a whole giant exercise that is not required for the purposes of Tier 1A. Potentially a conversation for future ENS, but it's a big project that we'd want to go to intentionally.
Yeah.
Fire districts just sounds so like,
Yeah.
there should be something around fire districts.
Yeah.
It does also amuse me though, that But in context, that if you were to map out all the buildings in Burlington pre-1940, you wouldn't be able to see the base map.
Oh, it's true. No, if you actually look at the mapping,
Yeah.
that's actually absolutely true, because
Yeah.
they've done their own, they did this for themselves a few years ago,
Wow, that's a lot.
unrelated to tier 1A,
Yeah.
and it's just like ding, 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 all the way down the street.
Pre-1940, you know, in 1930, we had 400 people who South Burlington.
Yeah,
There is
the-
one house I did want to flag just for a second, because it's an interesting story. You mentioned teal.
Oh, yes, our teal friend.
The tier 1A standard includes the ability for the State Historic Preservation Office to make note of a building. There's one building right here that is the oldest building in Vermont, but it hasn't been in Vermont that whole time.
It wasn't built.
So it was built around 1730, 1740.
1732.
And reconstructed. He was brought up from Connecticut,
That was New York State.
you know. Anyway,
Anyway,
from some other state in the 40s and rebuilt completely here. It was evaluated, but it was evaluated in
I think it was reconstructed in 1950, and then it was evaluated in 1993. So it was only 43 years in its new spot.
right. So
It's off Swift Street.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
so
off
it was
of
flagged as
Woodford-
being like a
Woodford
fact.
Road. The little street that goes south from Swift Street right there. Oh, no.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about too.
In any case, because it's so old, and it was stated in its evaluation in 1993 that it is a, you know, well rebuilt reconstruction of a home, given that it might be the oldest or is likely the oldest
Revolutionary.
of Vermont, even though it wasn't built here. We thought that would be one too.
Oh,
So that's what old like it is.
But that's, of course, that it's was that yellow house. with-
Springhouse Road.
I think.
It's on Springhouse Road.
Yeah.
So before those other homes were added on Springhouse Road, it was the only one.
It's the first house on Springhouse?
I think it's the deepest house on Springhouse.
Yep.
I thought it was this one. This one.
You're right. It's 250.
Anyway, so that's one that we thought that we get their specific feedback on.
Yeah.
Two houses there.
So just as an interesting point, for whatever reason, a lot of this documentation is dated either 1979 to 1993. The dates, the number of applications or paperwork that has been submitted since 1993 is 6 or 7 things. Some as recent as one of them was 2025 for
demolition
documentation.
Right, and then there was the airport noise mitigation in the
And there
late
was
2010s.
There was one in 2017. But it's been pretty sparse. And so something that we've talked about, again, as part of a future, much bigger project is the very first threshold for considering if something is historic is being 50 years old. And I don't want to upset anybody, but that was 1976. So at this point, we have a lot of neighborhoods that have a lot of properties that were constructed before that date. Whether or not they have been extensively renovated or are a good example of their architectural style, like there's all these other factors that are included. But when you think about 1993 as the last bigger wave of things in the database, that would have been 1943, which is a much different South Burlington. So anyway, this is the mapping as it is now. We're working a bit on symbology and some of the legend and how it works with the other maps that we have going. But we just wanted to share that with you all. Oh, great.
That's cool.
Great.
So we have other business.
No action.
right?
We have one other business update to the LDRs.
Oh, yes, so, one of the technical changes that you, approved, technical and minor changes was to reestablish what had been a standard for a very long time, which is that in, outside of your residential districts to allow under certain circumstances, single user complexes to have multiple rentable buildings on a single lot. So the current zoning says every single building needs its own lot. There are circumstances where there's a single complex, like the airport or UVM or a few of the larger businesses that might have like a car wash and a car dealer as being two. So this was being reestablished. As we were looking at an example of it just this week, we flagged that there might be a little bit of ambiguity in the language and how it's being read. So we're looking at this. The council has the ability to make minor changes up to 14 days before the public hearing, as long as they're not substantive, and then it would just stay with the round. If they do that, it would go next Monday, so as to keep on track on the schedule, and then you would get notice of that for your meeting on the 28th. So just giving you a heads up about a thing. It would not be of substantive change, but we want to be transparent. That may come to you. Ultimately, we're reviewing with legal counsel, and it might be that though it's ambiguous, that if we don't have a solution that works better, we also may not do it. One day for that. So.
I have appointed all of you except for Colin, so I really don't know you, Colin. Could you tell me, like I did for you, a little bit about your background?
Oh, yeah,
Like,
sure.
you know what you bring to the table.
Yeah, no, I'm Colin. I grew up in Maine. I moved here 3 years ago, I think. Yeah, was it? Yeah, 3 years ago. And yeah, I'm renting an apartment over near Farrell Street. And yeah, I'm just very interested in land usage and stuff. In particular, my day job is as a transportation engineer for the state of Vermont. So definitely very interested in kind of
that?
Oh, like traffic engineering, mostly like designing intersections and stuff like the Shelburne Street roundabouts my boss designed, that kind of stuff. I'm currently working on the we will work on the big exit 16 by Costco, that project, and we'll work on that one. So yes, that Virgin Diamond. Yep, it's moving fast. It's going to be here pretty soon. But yeah, so I'm just particular. I'm very interested in sort of how mobility help people get around, and then simply put, if your land use isn't good, your job of making an effective transportation system becomes very challenging. See Houston, where they have 20 lanes of freeways and they're all jam packed. It's not the traffic engineer's fault, it's the lane user's fault. So that's kind of how I get into this kind of stuff. But yeah, so hi. Nice to meet you.
We have a good mix of backgrounds, which I think will be. Okay, I believe we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Good eye.